Well, now we have our last intercooler pipe. So this is gonna be the inlet. So I originally bought two 45-degree bends, and I didn't realize with the cone and the throttle body and everything how low it was gonna hang, and I wound up being able to get away with 145, or I'm sorry, 190. So this is going to be the only piece we're using. So what I'm going to do now is weld one of our HD clamps to our throttle body, and then we will get this bolted on and everything kind of looking where it needs to be. Okay guys, so this is where we have our throttle body assembly here. Now I decided to actually, I was going to put the clamp here, and then with the throttle body, and this pipe could be removable, but looking at it now, it's so far out of the way as it is, I don't think it really makes a difference. And now before I weld and commit to anything, we gotta find a place for our blow-off valve. So I'm just gonna try to find a good location for it that's kind of out of the way. I don't think it's a big deal, but I do want to avoid getting like dirt and crap all in it if possible. I could put it right before the throttle body blade here or something. So I figured out the blow-off valve placement, and I think we're going to go right here with it. So what I did was I notched this, the flange just at a little bit of an angle, so it puts it nice and flush with the throttle body, you know, the angle of the throttle body. And my idea, or my thought process is, the idea of a blow-off valve is just to relieve the pressure that is in the charge pipe when the throttle body snaps closed. Now, you can really put your blow-off valve anywhere in between the compressor and the throttle body plate itself. So my idea is if you put it as close to the throttle body plate as possible, that prevents all the air coming down and out. So let's say if you put this right at the outlet of the compressor, all the air that, once this is closed, all the air that is in the intercooler has to backtrack and go out of the intercooler, charge pipe, and everything. So it has to, the air essentially has to go all the way back out all that distance. This way the air comes right out right here. So that's my thought behind it. I guess there's a couple other theories, but you know, from what I've seen, this is, and logically this makes the most sense to me. And also mounting it high like this up in the motor prevents it from getting all the dirt and crap kicked up by the tires, which would be very close in any other location. Also, this allows me to pull the intercooler off by mounting it here without having to undo the blow-off valve. So I can pull the whole intercooler off without having to take that blow-off valve off and things like that. So here's the final setup. We have our blow-off valve mounted here. We gotta weld everything up. We gotta knock a hole in that. I'll do this last. Once everything's welded, we're gonna just finalize this and do this last cut here and weld our tube onto our intercooler. And that's looking pretty rad. So I'm happy with that setup. Well, here's the finished product. Quite the throttle body setup, but it's pretty rad. I got my TPS sensor, so that's in, and we're gonna bolt this back on just lightly, and then we're gonna mark our bungs for our vacuum sources and things like that, and we'll ultimately pull the intake manifold back off here and get those the vacuum ports welded on. So here's the intercooler. This side's welded up. This side, we're just finishing up the spots we couldn't hit when it was on the car. And that's that. Okay, our intercooler's finished. While I was welding that, I pulled off the intake manifold, and now it's time to weld some vacuum references onto this. So I decided I'm going to do 5 references. I know I'm going to use at least, I think, 4 of them. So I'm going to have 5 just so we have an extra, so we don't have any problems or worry about doing this after the fact. We can just put a plug in it if we have to. These are 1/8 inch NPT fittings. Okay, the other thing we're going to do is weld on our fuel pressure regulator. So that's going to go right here. All right, friends. Well, we have our intercooler finished. It's actually right here. We have our intake manifold, all the vacuum ports dialed in. We just have to weld on our fuel pressure regulator mount, and we're pretty much done with the cold side of things. Just a few small things to button up, but nothing major. Okay, guys, so I just want to show you a few things I ran into with mounting fuel pressure regulators and trying to get everything buttoned up on the intake manifold. So my goal is to get everything that touches this intake manifold more or less finished, so I don't have to pull this thing on and off again. So my original plan was I had a plate mounted to the fuel pressure regulator, which is right here, but with a fitting on, that would contact our power steering pump here. So that's not going to work. We also need to take into consideration our line, our return to the fuel pressure regulator, and the factory ports here were interfering as well. So I'm going to have to weld AN fittings here, but with the AN fittings, we're also going to have an issue with plumbing or routing the feed lines. So with that being said, I'm going to have to tee off the fuel rail like this. And then, just because our power steering lines and fuel lines are really close and kind of want to hit each other. For example, if I ran a 90 off my fuel rail, it directly intersects with that my power steering pump line. So, and also the power steering pump line, you know, I can't run it like this, so we're gonna have to kind of get a little creative with the lines for the power steering as well. So all these aren't a big deal, but it's just stuff I'm trying to button up so I can move on from the intake manifold. So my thought is I will mount my fuel pressure regulator actually over here to the body and just get it far away from all this stuff and not fixate here. That will also help us because it will allow us to access inside the engine bay a little more if we have to get at stuff in there. So I think that's going to be the best solution. I'll just riv nut a bracket onto the car or something like that, and that will be done. So, and then we're gonna have to figure out power steering lines. So I'm not trying to get ahead of myself and all that, but it's all stuff I have to consider at this point because, you know, buttoning up the intake manifold requires that foresight. I also have to figure out my brake booster line as well, so I'm gonna do that. I'll more than likely just see if I can heat this hard plastic hose here and put a barb to AN on it and just run an AN fitting to somewhere on, I don't know, maybe the back side of the intake manifold or something like that. So I have a few things here that I'm just, you know, just technical stuff. I'm not going to bore you with all this. A lot of it's just time consuming and just kind of figuring it out. That's what's going to be the best way to go. So I'm going to work on this now, get this buttoned up. And then on the next one, we're going to start working on the exhaust here. So I'll get all this stuff, try to get squared away. It's all gonna be like little nitpicky stuff, and I'll just go over it. There's no point in video, you know, me putting lines on stuff, but I'll highlight exactly what I did. And then on the next one, we're gonna start our exhaust system. I do have a cool idea for that, so I'm gonna start working on the exhaust on the next one, and then we'll move on to fuel system, and then electrical, and then we're pretty much we'll be at the point where this thing will be able to start. So we're getting really close. The turbo kit was a huge piece of this. So like I said, I'm just gonna get this buttoned up And we're just gonna keep cranking away at it, guys. So I really appreciate you watching, and stay tuned for the next one to see what we're gonna be working on next.